let me know when I should start.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen.
All right, very well. We're continuing our series on parenting, and today I just want to reflect on specifically on parent-child communication attachment. So just briefly, in our first reflection, we talked about a couple of things. Number one, we talked about the hierarchy of order in terms of how do we position sort of our relationships. And I suggested that in many writing, both secular and spiritual, the idea is God, spouse, child would be the order. And then we went into talking about the 4 S's of attachment according to Daniel Siegel, this idea of establishing safety, that the child's not going to thrive if there isn't safety. So environmental safety, but that you yourself become a safe person. You cannot be a source of love and a source of terror simultaneously. And we talked about disorganized attachment. So we talked about safety, seen, soothed, and secure. So if you missed that, you can go back and sort of just listen to that. And so today I sort of want to drill down a little bit more on communication in the context of attachment. So, most of us, if not all of us, are often thinking about how do we create a culture at home where our children seek us out. They're willing to talk to us about their feelings, their concerns, their plans, their dreams, their needs. And the fear is that somehow with time there'll be a source of disconnection or even enough conflict that we will not be people who they turn to, but they'll turn to others. And in some ways that frightens us. So how is it that we create and maintain, a culture where our children can actually have this relationship with us, where they share these important things with us? This diagram here about the parenting pyramid again, emphasizes sort of what we talked about last time, the sense of looking at yourself first, looking at your marriage, then looking at your relationship. And then there is this, it's a bit small, isn't it? Let me see if I could widen that. Yeah, I can't seem to zoom in, but I'll read you what it has, right? It says personal way of being, husband-wife relationship, parent-child relationship, then teaching and correcting. And one of the things that I think about sometimes is that we can oftentimes avoid a lot of the hard work by just skipping to teaching. And so if there's things that are unsettled in myself or in my marriage or in my relationship with my child, I could sort of have a sense of confidence in saying, this is what you ought to do, this is what you are not supposed to do, and then I could move into correcting. And somehow it gives me a sense that I'm in control and things are actually going well. So it's helpful, I think, sometimes it's helpful to be able to reflect and look at ourselves and what is it that we believe about ourselves and our roles as parents. And sometimes, when you present this question and if someone is being honest, they might say, I had a good upbringing, I had a good education, I have good experience, and I'm a pretty good person, and I think my child should be like me. I don't see what the problem is with that. My child should be like me. And then sort of the opposite, on the other side of the spectrum, you might have people who express a lot of shame, and they might say, I kind of hope my child's not like me. I'm kind of a little bit screwed up. I don't really like much of who I am, but my child can actually be like a trophy child. You know, if they get things right, in some ways they make up for my own insecurities. So I desperately want my child to succeed, you know, whatever that means, but I desperately want them to succeed because I need to sort of attach myself to their success. It's evidence for me that I've done something right, and at the end of the day, I'm not that bad. And actually, if you look at those two sort of beliefs, which I know they lie on a continuum, and there's probably a lot of gray in between. Many of us are not that polarized, right? But you have on one side this sort of like egoism, right? Like, I had a good education, I had a good upbringing, I don't see why my child doesn't become like me. And then on the other side of the spectrum is this sort of shame-based belief, you know, I'm not that good of a person, hopefully they become something better, and then I could attach myself to my child and go, look, I did something good. And if you think about this, it's two sides of the same coin. On one side is pride or egoism, on the other side is shame, and the coin itself is just self-centeredness. And so for me, I can make parenting not even about my kid. I have no idea who my kid is, where they're going, what they're doing, but at the core of it, it can just really be about me. And out of that sort of self-centeredness comes a style of parenting, sometimes called authoritarian parenting or permissive, uninvolved parenting, right? So if I'm deeply in my ego, there's a lot of rigidity in what my child should do or should not do, again, because I have this core belief that everything that I've received is just wonderful and great, and there's no reason why my child should not be like me and do the things that I tell him to do and behave in the way that I need to for my child to behave. So the authoritarian approach seeks total control. And then against this, you have a permissive parent who will do anything to be admired by their child. And there is sort of this sort of like seduction to get admiration from your child. Your child goes, oh, Mom, you're the best, Mom, because you're the one who knows how to make me my favorite meal. And it's seductive because you actually want to hear that. You go, oh, yes, and if you're struggling with self-esteem issues and that's not coming from marriage, that's not coming from work, that's a big temptation. I'm going to do that for you all the time. You just keep that coming. But in that dynamic, the child's totally lost. You know, that meal is not about them. And if we're honest, it's about me and what my emotional needs are. So I think, you know, the reward in this is the validation that I get, and of course that I get to escape the other stuff that I don't need to look at, you know. And parenting can do that, you know. So I think also, like, in understanding ourselves and our relationship with our kids, the nice thing to really reflect on also is what activates us in any direction. Like, what activates us in, like, being really, really angry and frustrated, or what activates you where, like, it pulls a lot on your heartstring, and to be able to just even look at that, because sometimes if it's activation like towards anger and agitation, you know, there's a beautiful saying, if you never heal from what hurt you, you'll bleed on people who didn't cut you. And so sometimes, you know, like, I might say to you know, to my kid, like, okay, it's time to get out of the bath. It's time to get out of the bath. It's time to get back. And then I'm just so angry that the child's not listening to me. And then Mom can walk up and say, like, hey, let's race to get out of the bath. And so I need to then think about, why can she, he, whatever your dynamic is, why can they sort of have the same experience and respond in a way that's less charged than you, than me? And that's the stuff I think it's helpful to look at. Because sometimes it's not about the kid just sort of being lost in play. It's about our own sort of childhood wounds. That growing up, I didn't feel heard, and I didn't feel respected, I didn't feel that I mattered. So when I say to my child, hey, can you bring that over here? Can you put your shoes on? And they don't do it. And you're like, you're enraged. Oftentimes, it's not about the moment, right? Because when you're in your sort of like grounded self, right? You're like, hey, I see you're struggling to put on your shoe. Do you need some help? Are we gonna race? But this sense of like, is usually not about that moment. So again, this is in the context of communication. We're talking about looking at ourselves and what we believe about ourselves and about our role as parents, but then also looking at the child. In our interaction with our children, we begin to form an image of who they are, and we hold that image in our heart. And so every interaction and conversation is an opportunity to continue to form their image in us and to continue to form them as well. And a lot of the conversations are not anything of importance. They're not significant. But over time, how we show up to these conversations over the years and decades will reap a huge result, right? But the point is this, that whatever my core belief is about my child will be communicated. Even if I am very, very cautious not to say anything, negative, whatever my core belief is, if I look at my child and say, you're lazy, you're irresponsible, you don't follow through on things, whatever those beliefs are, they will be communicated to the child. And there's a nice research that came out of UCLA in 1971. I don't know if that's been sort of like scratched and obliterated by now, but I like it, and I think it makes a good point. So the research here is looking at when we communicate a message from one person to another, how much of that message is word, how much of it is tone, and how much of it is behavior. And this is the breakdown. The breakdown is that when you're communicating a message from one person to another, only 7% are words, and 38% is tone. So if I said, I'm so happy to be here with you today. This is great, right? If I ask you to repeat what I said, you say, well, you said you were happy to be here and it's great. But the tone implied something totally different. And then 55% was behavior. So when you look at communication, you see that 93% have nothing to do with words. Nothing to do with words. So if you believe that your child is not smart, is lazy, is rude, is dishonest, this will be communicated to them just in your tone, in your behavior, and they'll just see it. They'll see it in your eyes, they'll hear it in your tone, the way you touch them, the way you hug them, the way you sit next to them, the way you walk next to them. I would like to tell this story that even when Abby was in diapers, right, I was changing her on the changing table. She was maybe between 2 and 3 years old. And she kept on moving around, and I felt she was going to fall off the table. And I said to her, please stop moving. Being intuitive and emotionally intelligent, she said, I don't like the way that you said that. She was between 2 and 3. And I said, what didn't you like? She said, the way you just said that. And I said, I felt scared and that you were going to get hurt, and I felt frustrated you weren't listening to me. And she said, you can say it differently. And I said, how do you want me to say it? And she said, whisper it like this. And I said, and if I whisper it like this, are you going to listen? And she said, yeah. Right? So it was pretty amazing that even at that young, she picked up on the tone and said, the tone is sharp and the tone is hurtful. I don't like it. Right? I don't like it. This is a different generation, right? Because if it was me 100 years ago, I would have probably just acted out being upset, right? I would have just sort of did whatever I did just to act out that I'm angry with my dad. A big part, I think, of effectively communicating with our kids has to be with starting with the heart and seeing them beyond their behavior. That my child, one, is a gift from God. They don't belong to me. They're not mine. I don't possess them. They belong to God. I'm a steward of my child. And I think this is also a very healthy way so we can start detaching as they get into adolescence and early adulthood. We could learn to say goodbye in a good way, because we don't feel like we possess them. They're ours, you know. So I think this is healthy and spiritually mature to think of it this way, that our children are a gift from God. They belong to God. We're steward of this child, and that God parents us both. That God is our Father, and He parents us both. In the way that my child struggles, I struggle, right? And to the extent that I could heal, my child can also heal. I was debating whether or not to bring this in today or to bring it in at another time, but I said, hey, why not? Let's just jump into it. There was a study that was done in 1995 by Kaiser Permanente and also the CDC. This is a big study, 17,000 participants. And 17,000 participants were given just a small scale, 10 questions. And the question asked about their experience with their family of origin in the first 18 years of life. I'll read you some of the questions. I'll read you 5 out of the 10. And the research suggested that if you scored, well, let's put it this way. The higher the number that you scored, the greater correlation with mental health disorder, but also medical disease, such as, you know, heart condition, diabetes, hypertension. And some of the questions were, did you live with anyone who was depressed, mentally ill, or attempted suicide? Did your parent ever hit, beat, threaten to harm each other? So this is not directed towards you. This is just the parents among each other looking for domestic violence. Did a parent or adult in your home ever swear at you, insult you, or put you down? Did a parent in your home ever hit, beat, kick, or physically hurt you in any way? And then the last question, did you feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were special? So those are the questions. If you scored 4 or above, you were 460% more likely to be depressed than a person with an ACE score of 0. And that adults who experienced 4 or more ACEs shows 12 times higher prevalence of health risks such as alcoholism, drug use, depression, suicide attempts. And you know, what came out of this study was sort of a different way of also looking at the medical model. When someone came in and they were diagnosed with diabetes and coronary artery disease, they started diagnosing it different. They started with childhood abuse, and then morbid obesity, then diabetes, and so it was more of a biopsychosocial assessment of the individual, which the medical model often fails to do. They just look at you as a physical sort of detached being from your psychology and your spirit, and they go, oh, look, you have diabetes, you should change your diet. But actually sort of the source of that is rarely ever addressed. So if we go back to this communication being 738-55, most of it being nonverbal, what is the behavior that has the greatest influence? Well, the part of the communication that has the greatest influence is just us. It's just us. It's our attitude, it's our determination, it's just sort of how we show up in the relationship. So the question is, what do we model for our children? And so the first thing that we want to ask ourselves is, are we respectful and kind? And do we actually listen to understand? Like if someone is speaking in the house, are you actually listening to understand? And can we express emotions? So we said, oh, we're going to be great parents when Abby comes from school. We're going to ask her, did anything make you sad today? Right? Among other things. And so she answered, and then she turned to Mom. Anything make you sad today, Mom? I said, we thought we were going to dodge this one. Dad, did anything make you sad today? Well, I mean, the extent that child is going to be emotionally intelligent is the extent that we're able to sort of model this. So can I talk about it in an age-appropriate way about how I felt, what I needed, and can I express that to her? If I haven't done that work, and I'm just expecting something from her that I myself haven't done, it's too hard. And the big one is, like, can I apologize when I'm wrong? Can I apologize when I'm wrong? I think last week when at the parenting conference, Archdeacon Mark talked about this. He said that there were oftentimes, like, some of the women who are getting married, they cringe about the statement of and to him you shall submit and so on. They're like, oh, I don't like that. And he talks about, like, a conversation that he has with a woman, and she starts describing the church as being sort of this male dominant sort of male superiority, all this stuff. And as she's describing all this stuff, he says to her, wow, this sounds a lot like your dad. And she says, actually, yeah, it is my dad. And he says, yeah, this has nothing to do with the church. It has a lot to do with your relationship with your dad. You're describing a lot of your dad. And so the point that he was trying to make is that often, like, our presence in the home sort of creates a prototype of what God is like and sort of what men are like in the community. And so particularly for dads, there's a great responsibility for us to lead with love, with respect, with humility, with courage, and to keep the best interests of the family at heart at all times, as much as this is possible. But the apologizing thing is big, because I mean, for me as a clinician, I don't really work with children. I work with adults, but a lot of adults will say this. I have pain. I could never bring it up to my parent, because they'll do one of two things. Either they'll become a martyr or they'll counterattack. Either they'll say, oh, well, there's nothing good that I've ever done, right? I've just screwed up everything. I did everything wrong. It's like, no, I didn't say you did everything wrong. I'm saying on this occasion, you did this, and that really hurt me. But the parent can't hear that. Or, like, what about you? You were a difficult child. What do you think I had to do? Blah, blah, blah. Right? And what the adult child is looking for is just to say, yeah, you know what? That I wasn't my best self in that situation. I'm really sorry that hurt you. And that's all that they're looking for. So I bring this up to say, if we can do that in our relationship with our kids, I think we'd save them a lot of heartache, and I think it's possible. I think we can do it. I also wonder if this is why some of the people don't go to confession, because speaking to a spiritual father can mimic your relationship with your own father, and that might not look like the return of the prodigal son. And so this idea of going and sitting with a father to talk about things that you are not very proud of might feel like the last thing that you've ever want to do. So even just correcting that in ourselves, having a presence of a father that is loving and firm and kind and respectful can change a lot and can heal a lot of pain. The other thing about communication is, because it's nonverbal, because much of it is nonverbal, oftentimes the way that we communicate, especially to children, that you're important, you matter, I'm here for you, is through play. I don't know of something else that is more important than play. And for us, play also says that I don't take myself too seriously, which is good for our soul. I could be present in the moment. I could set everything aside, even if it's only for a few minutes, and just be with you. Goofy, silly, playful, fun, just be. And especially if it's directed by the child, this is one of the most connecting things that we can do with our children. Okay. When we are communicating and when we are using words, this is what people tell us that we should do that might be helpful. Number one, we want to be present, and we want to be focused, and we want to remove distractions. And so even now as an adult, like when we're talking to each other, how many times have you been talking to someone and they're like, yeah, just 1 second, yeah, yeah. And you're like, okay, we could do this like at a different time. And I get it. Sometimes it's like, your spouse is like, do we have milk? Should I bring milk home or not? I'm at the store, and you need to answer it while you're talking to your kid. So I get it. There's always exceptions to this. But as much as it is possible, like if we have time to connect with our kids, like let's make it, let's be deliberate about like putting the phone somewhere where we can't see it. And then, practicing being warm, our tone, our body language, making this experience feel relaxing, feel good. Our child coming and talking to us about something difficult is going to depend on the last interaction they had with us. And sometimes it's just that simple. And the younger you are in age, the closer those things are together. And so as you get older, you sort of you collect a lot of experience and you go, yeah, no, I'm not talking to mom about this. I'm not talking to dad about this. But at a younger age, it's just what happened 5 minutes ago. You and I, we played Play-Doh together and we laughed or whatever. I think I could come to you and tell you this thing now. So we want to be warm. We want to make it emotionally safe, relaxing. And when children are engaging with us, we want to listen to understand. And we'll talk about this more sort of in a different context, but at least for this context, we want to just listen to understand and sometimes just reflect back what we're understanding. Okay, so you went to school and then, you saw Sarah, but she was talking to another girl, so you didn't get a chance to play with her. Is that right? At the very least, what you're doing is you're removing the possibility of the child walking away saying, nobody gets it. I don't feel understood. Like, at the very least, that's just it. Is that what happened? You're not validating, you're not like rescuing, you're not doing anything. You're just saying, like, is that what I understand? Is that right? That in itself is very, very helpful. And if we want to take it a step further, we want to be a little bit curious and ask questions, right? If my child brings me a picture, I can just say, oh, nice. Or I could say, oh, wow, I see all these colors. What did you do with this? Just asking some questions out of curiosity. And then if they're bringing something to us that they're hurt about something, I went to do this and this didn't happen, I feel sad, to show some empathy. Right? And I like the definition of, and I forget who the author is, but the idea of empathy is stepping into the mud with the other person so that the other person is not left alone. So rather than pulling them out, you're actually just stepping in the mud with them. You're going like, oh yeah, this is icky, yucky, and terrible, and I'm here with you. It's just sort of like when someone dies, for example, in your family, and a friend comes over and they just sit on the couch with you, and you're like, oh, do you need to go home? Do you have somewhere to go? No, just gonna sit. Do you want me to make tea? Do you want? No? Okay, we'll just sit. Well, what are they doing? They're just sitting with you in your pain. They're not saying much because there's not much to say, but they're just letting you know, I'm here with you. And so this sense of empathy is really, really important. And what's more important is that we let them feel the pain rather than remove it. So your child comes and says, I feel really sad because this person didn't want to play with me or didn't invite me to a birthday party. Our instinct is to say, well, that's okay. These other kids, they invite you to birthday parties. That's fine. But what we're doing is saying that feeling of sadness and rejection is intolerable. So when it happens to you in your life, you just disconnect from it and you start thinking of other things because it's intolerable for you and it's intolerable for me. It makes me uncomfortable as well. And I don't know how much that prepares them for life, because life has a whole bunch of stuff that is sad and disappointing and hurtful, and we want them to be prepared, to have experienced this feeling in their body. They've experienced it in a loving presence, and they know how to be sad, how to be disappointed. They're not just going to sort of, you're not going to continue masking it until they're 20 years old and something really bad happens and then they just like fall apart because they've never really knew how to manage feelings like sadness or disappointment or shame or whatever. So the other point that we want to sort of just reflect on is like offering feedback. When we're communicating and it's time to offer feedback, some helpful reminders that you already know, is to avoid both criticism and empty praise, right? Criticism is more, character attack. You're stupid. You're lazy. You're whatever. And empty praise is just like, you're the best kid in the world. You're the most awesome person. Nobody's ever like you. And the reason why that's unhelpful, because it's not going to take very long till that gets disproven. That kid's going to go to school and they're going to recognize they're not the smartest, they're not the most awesome, they're not the fastest, they're not the best, whatever, violinist. So that's not really what we want to praise. We do want to praise, but that's not it. What we want to praise is actually character development. And I'll just give you a small example of this, right? My daughter came to me and was like, "Dad, I'm so excited. I could go across the monkey bar, and I want you to come and to see it." And I said, yeah, like, I'll come. I want to see it. And she went. She got on the monkey bar. She went 1, 2, boop, dropped. And then she looked at me. Said, "That's okay. Do it again." And then she got up again. 1, 2, boop, dropped. Then another kid came. Went all the way. And then she looked at me kind of disappointed. I said, "That's okay. Try again." And time, and she's falling. And she's looking at me, and she's beginning to be embarrassed. And like, I invited Dad to show him, and did this like 6, 7 times. And then I called her over, and I said, "I am so proud of you." And I really was. And I was only proud of her that she just didn't say, I give up. I give up. And so what I prayed was the determination. I'm so proud of you that you kept going back up again and again and again and again. And it was sincere. I really was very proud of her because of that determination. And that's what I want her to take with her in life. Like, sometimes you're going to set expectations, you're going to set goals, you're going to get crushed. But you're willing to go back up again because you have people who support you and love you and they're standing behind you, and it's okay. So we want to look for pockets of these moments where we praise hard work, honesty, integrity, friendship, right? She's racing with another girl, and the girl falls and she doesn't continue the race. She stops and says, "Oh, my friend hurt herself." We identify that. Why? Character development. You're a good friend. You stayed with your friend. You had her back. That's good. We highlight that. Life can't take that away from you. Life can't take that away from you. So we scan to highlight what is being done well, particularly when it's relational. And instead of bringing it to the ego, we go, "Hey, I bet your friend felt that they were really supported. I bet your friend felt that they were really loved in that moment." And then they begin to think relationally. That what I'm doing isn't it just about me being like a good person or special, but what I'm doing is good for other people. This matters to the other person. Okay. I just want to say something on criticism, a little bit more about criticism. Sometimes it's a temptation that if something is being done wrong again and again and again and again and again, that we all fall into this trap and say, "You're being irresponsible, you're being whatever, and we'll put these labels, the criticism labels. And what ends up happening is when we criticize, we're doing a couple things. Number one is we're building core beliefs. Look, so sometimes in adulthood, you'll see someone who says, "I wanted to take this business adventure, and I thought to myself, you're not going to make it, you're going to fail." And you ask them, "Whose voice is that?" And right away, they'll say, "My mother's. My mother always told me that." Or right away, they'll say, "It was my dad." right? So even that internal working voice becomes their own, right? So we begin to form a core belief, and then we begin to have a self-fulfilling prophecy, like go clean your room. Or the kid will have a thought like, I should go clean my room, and then they'll think, but I'm lazy. Lazy people don't clean the room. And so I've adopted this identity. I am a lazy person, so I don't clean my room. Or they spend the rest of their life defending against the wound. And so there's a person I'm working with now. She's in her 30s, multi-millionaire executive. And it's like, why are you in therapy? Anxiety. What's the anxiety about? Being an average person. That's my anxiety. My fear is I just become an average person. What does it mean for you to be an average person? That my mom was right, that I'm useless. So what drives this? You might think, well, criticism doesn't sound so good, but here she is, millionaire, in a great relationship with a great guy, doing very well. But the anxiety is about just becoming so-called average. So you have so many people walking around with this like not enough hole in the heart. I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not successful enough, I'm not lovable enough, I'm not enough in so many ways. And American society sort of thrives on that. That's important, because if you're not enough, consumerism helps you. You need to buy this, you need to do this, you need to try, and then eventually you'll be enough. And so at least we want our kids to come out of the home feeling like, I know I'm loved by God. I know that in my core I'm good. I know that I'm not perfect. I make many mistakes, and I've taken this. I'm okay with this, because God will forgive me. God does forgive me, and God loves me, and I know I'm a sinner and I'm redeemed by Christ, and that's solid for me. Yeah. Otherwise you have, people will spend the rest of their life people pleasing, right? And going back to the Kaiser research, right? Lower back pain, GI problems, migraines, all related to poor boundaries, people pleasing. I really need you to do this for me. Oh, yeah, right away. Why? I don't want to disappoint my boss. I don't want to disappoint this person. Why? Because I've always been a disappointment to my parents. I'm not going to add on to that disappointment. And it also seems virtuous. I mean, to him to know to do good and doesn't, it's a sin. So shouldn't this be good? I just go around doing a whole bunch of stuff. But you're not doing it to please the Lord. You're doing it because you're terrified of rejection. That's the difference, right? And what, I don't know how much time we have on this, but what people end up doing when they grow up with, for example, like a critical father, and I've seen this a lot. You have a girl who grows up and she'll say like, I was 13 years old and I drank 8 cups of coffee so I could stay up and study and take a national exam. Then I came in second, and then my dad would say, well, why didn't you come in first? That's the first thing out of his mouth. Well, what happened? Why didn't you come in first? And then this sense of there's nothing that I could do to please you. I could never ever be good enough. And people like that either become people pleasers, perfectionists, workaholics, or they marry someone exactly opposite of their dad, and then they take the role of their dad. So they'll marry a guy who's very like, sure honey, whatever you want. Do you want to eat this or that? Whatever you like, honey. And then 3 years later, then that woman is pulling her hair. She's like, I need you to be more driven. I need you to be blah, 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 blah. And then she'll start criticizing him, and then have a moment of collapse. She's like, I myself have become like my dad. And this is how stuff goes on from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation. Yeah. And so then we have a crucial responsibility of forming our kids so that it's not that we're not holding them accountable, not pushing them to do hard things. We want them to do hard things. We want to push them. We want them to feel difficult feelings. Yes, you were rejected. You felt sad. You felt hurt. I'm gonna sit with you in this, right? I'm not gonna pacify it. Oh, but your friend Jenny likes you, and we're not gonna do that. We're gonna sit in it. You're gonna feel it. It's hard. You're gonna grow emotionally. It's hard stuff, but we're not going to attack their character. We're not going to touch that. Yeah. There's a beautiful book. That I'm reading now. It's called The Long Journey Towards Serenity by Andre Denault, who's a Catholic priest. And he delves more into this perfectionism. And I want to read you some of the things that he says on this. Of course, sometimes we think of perfectionism as like a good thing. I just have to do it this way. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And people go, oh, good for you. I love that. But perfectionism is oftentimes just a coping mechanism for pain, right? It's a coping mechanism for pain. So this is what he says. Perfectionism starts when love and acceptance by the parents depend on the performance of the child. He cannot relax nor taste joy or pleasure. He cannot allow himself to simply live and savor good moments. He abandons his true self to adopt his idolized image. The desire of admiration is then a substitute for love. He is the best, or among the best, or he is of no value. He is nothing. There's an enormous dependence on admirations from others. And then, I don't know how deep you guys want to get into this, but let's just get into it. And then he quotes a famous psychologist, and then he says, depression, a feeling of emptiness, the impression of self-alienation and absurdity of life lie in wait and invade them as soon as the drug of grandiosity fails them. Soon as they are no longer on top, they are not headliners. In other words, so perfectionism says, if I can't get your love, I'm going to get your validation. If you won't authentically love me, you'll praise me. Because I will be perfect. There's nothing that I will do that will upset you. And because I can't keep this rigidity for too long, I'm then going to drop and sink into depression. I'm absolutely worthless. And I feel empty. So what we're going for is not sort of validating external behaviors that we want to see. We want the presence of the person, of the child to feel, I am loved just being me. Sometimes I get A's, sometimes I get B's, sometimes I get C's, but I'm loved. Sometimes I do good in piano, sometimes I don't do good in piano, but I'm loved. The long journey towards serenity. Highly recommend it. Let's take 2 more minutes and then we'll stop. We'll say something about communication when presented with a problem. So oftentimes, kids at whatever age are bringing issues to us, are bringing problems to us. And the temptation is always to turn around and to say, yes, you should do X, you should do Y, you should do this, right? But I want to remind us that our role is to teach kids how to think rather than telling them what to do. Our goal is to teach them how to build effective problem-solving skills and to feel competent. Like that's success. So that then as they grow into adulthood, they encounter a problem, they go, okay, I know sort of a way to think about this that is helpful for me. And by the way, that takes a lot of maturity on the parents' side. Like the end goal is for your progress, not for me to come and save you and rescue you. And you go, oh gosh, mom, you're so brilliant. God, dad, you're so amazing, right? So, you know, a good example of this is when Christ was at Simon the Pharisee's house, and Simon's sort of messed up in all his thinking. Christ could have turned around and just corrected him and said, what you're thinking is wrong. Don't think like that. Think like this. But he doesn't do that. He engages him in more contemplative, more deeper thinking. And he does that with the parables. He does that so many times where he says, let me tell you something. Let me tell you a story. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to learn from Christ. So he says, you know, a creditor had two debtors. One had owed 500 dinars, the other 50. And when he freely forgave them both, which one would love him more? And so the guy is thinking, so, okay, 500, 50, right? And Christ is helping him to think properly, to correct his thinking, because the sickness is in his thinking. And then leads him to say, well, I suppose the one whom he forgave more. And he says, you said that. Good job. Good job. Bravo. Good job. Right? And so one of the things that's helpful for us is that when our kids present us with a problem, that we give it back to them. Right? And they're here. So we should stop. Okay, glory be to God forever. Amen.
Sam, will you pick up with this?
Yeah, I'll pick up with this next month.
So, the last Saturday of each month will be devoted to a topic like this. And it will be a continuation of this. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any questions for Sam?
Is this recorded?
We streamed it.
I'm proud of you, man. That's wonderful.
Great job. Is that empty, Chris?